This is Open to Debate. I'm John Donvan. Hi, everybody. And today what I'm thinking of as the ultimate behind-the-scenes look at this organization, because in part it's going to be the origin story of this program, Open to Debate, how we came to be, why we came to be, and we are doing that by having as my sole guest the man who both founded and first funded us, Robert Rosenkranz. To be complete about this, Robert Rosenkranz is the chairman of Open to Debate, and he provides generous, major funding to Open to Debate through the Rosenkranz Foundation. The timing for this conversation being just about perfect, because Robert Rosenkranz is just coming out with a great book, a book I have now read multiple times already. Its title is The Stoic Capitalist, Advice for the Exceptionally Ambitious. It's a book of advice he wants to put out there for others on how to create and make the best of the opportunities within your grasp. He has not only been thinking about what he would like to say to the next generation or the ones that follow that, about how to do that, but how best to communicate the precepts that he has tried to live by. And in doing that, he decided that a book would be the way. I am now going to welcome the Stoic Capitalist himself to his first interview appearance on this program, Robert Rosenkranz. Bob, welcome to Open to Debate.
It is a pleasure to be here, John, and particularly because the ideas behind Open to Debate are so well aligned with the whole philosophy of the Stoic Capitalist.
All of which I'm hoping we're going to get to. But I want to back up to just sort of like primary motivations for doing this book in the first place. I get the sense you've had this idea cooking for a long time.
It was a long time, and it took a long time to come up with a format and an approach that I felt really create a book worth writing. But the motivation, as you've asked about, was really to try to help readers realize their childhood dreams, give them a toolkit, a philosophical toolkit, a psychological toolkit that would help people in ambitious pursuits, and not just about financial success, but about any ambitious goal that might be far removed from the circumstances of one's childhood.
So for folks who don't know who you are now, just fill us in on what you've achieved over the course of your life.
Well, I'd say the most conspicuous success I've had is really as in a business career. I've built an insurance company called Delphi, which was a quite substantial enterprise. I was sort of present at the creation of the hedge fund industry, of the leveraged buyout industry, of the junk bond business, and incorporated a lot of those ideas and strategies into building businesses both in insurance, investment management, real estate finance. But I've also felt right from an early age that philanthropy and public service were integral parts of a well-lived life.
Define well-lived life. What do you mean by that term?
Well, I think it means for me finding something to do that calls forth all of your energies, all the broadest range of talents, that encourages you to be as creative and committed and energized as possible. And to find something like that in life is to me critical for a well-lived life. But there are other ideas, including working for the benefit of society, using reason to regulate emotion, using your time very consciously, prioritizing according to what's really important to you, and avoiding distractions, recognizing that time is our most precious resource. So those are Stoic ideas that to me are foundational to a well-lived life, and the book develops those ideas in a lot of different applications.
And how do you grade yourself on the well-lived life? Have you lived it well?
I feel pretty satisfied.
So you mentioned the Stoics, and their philosophy goes back more than 2,000 years. And as you say, you're going to help us understand why those precepts are still relevant today and how they played a role in your life. So it all starts with you as a kid, and you were born in 1942 in New York City. Bob, take us back to the kitchen table of the home you grew up in and tell us what was going on there.
Well, there was no kitchen table because we had a kitchenette that was so tiny there was no room for a table. And it was a very small apartment. My parents slept in a pull-out couch in the living room. I had the bedroom. My mother was afraid that the electricity was going to get cut off or the phone was going to get cut off. And as a 7-year-old, I was very well aware that how precarious they thought their financial situation was.
Did it stress you out as a kid?
Well, I would say it really gave me a feeling that I would have to figure out for myself how the world worked. It was clear that my parents were not succeeding, and it gave me a sense of self-reliance. And it's really an illustration of a Stoic idea that the obstacle becomes the way. So the obstacle was financial insecurity. The way was self-reliance, taking full responsibility for your own life at a very early age.
What did your parents make of you at that point?
They were extremely proud of me. They were very supportive. I had 44 first cousins. They were very proud that I seemed to be the brightest in the group. And I had the sense that they considered me the best thing in their lives, which was very positive, obviously.
But you talk about your mom in particular kind of communicating a sense of her own powerlessness, that she felt that the world was the way that it was and it was stacked against her. Is that accurate?
She felt that her financial position was really not within her control. And more broadly, she felt that people who had money had it just sort of, they were blessed with money, like they were blessed with blue eyes or something. It was just something that happened. And that struck me as a really, really bad idea. I mean, if you're an ambitious kid trying to make your way in the world or figure it out, to have that as a set of ideas. And my mother was also a communist. She was spouting Marxist ideology all the time. But again,
which did not take with you. That ideology did not take with you.
It did not, but I think it gave me something of real value, which is, again, the obstacle was bad ideas. The way was critical thinking. And because I was thinking critically about the ideas that my mother was expressing, that became a kind of a lifelong habit of thinking critically about any received wisdom. And I think it's one of the success factors that this book encourages people to do and to employ in their own lives.
So what did your parents do for work?
My mother was a clerk in a drugstore. Mm-hmm. My father, during a couple of years when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, was unemployed. He ultimately got a job, one of the worst jobs in America, as a debit agent for Metropolitan Life Insurance Company, which involved going up to Harlem and collecting weekly insurance premiums. So they were struggling.
So I only wanted to go into all of that because you do in the book, but that for you, everything you've described, you describe as kind of the negative role model against which you kind of formulated how you wanted to approach the world, who you wanted to be, even as a kid. And you talk about, first of all, you did really well in school. You just had intellectual gifts, as you say, the smartest kid among the cousins. But you talk about setting out to learn how to change your circumstances, and you did that through reading. What were you reading?
Well, before I get to that, let me just, in fairness, I did talk about my upbringing as having negative aspects to it, but during the years when my father was unemployed particularly, he had a lot of time for me. Mm-hmm. And our favorite mode of play was really intellectual. He would give me mathematical problems. He'd give me word problems. He'd give me puzzles to solve. And so I got from my father a sense that one of the most fun activities you could have is learning. And that, again, was a wonderful lifelong idea. And when I went to first grade, I was just years ahead of the other kids. But back to your question about the book, I was a voracious reader as a kid of biographies. And I read biographies not only of business leaders, but government officials, generals, scientists, humanitarians, historic figures, hundreds of biographies. So that really became my sort of mode of self-education, getting the role models that I would want to emulate.
Are any of those biographies standouts for you? Any particular lives?
The Carnegie and Rockefeller biographies kind of, to me, were a model of what role philanthropy should play in the well-lived life. And these guys were not just writing checks. They were creating the institutions that they felt the society needed. Carnegie Libraries and Carnegie Hall and Rockefeller University, University of Chicago. Now, they had vastly more means than I ever had, but I had that as a kind of a goal or an ambition to really try to bring into being organizations that I felt the society needed, and Open to Debate is a prime example of that.
So you went to Yale as an undergraduate. At what age?
I was 19 when I graduated. I was the youngest guy in my class.
Yeah, I would think so. How was it being, so you're a 16-year-old at
Yep.
Yale. How was that?
You know, academically, it was great. I loved it. I was very happy student of economics. I took courses in art history and architecture, which created lifetime interest in those fields. So I had a very good time on that dimension. Socially, I was a bit awkward. I mean, I was a little kid relative to most of my classmates, but I didn't feel lonely or isolated. I had a bunch of friends who were also kind of nerdy, and they certainly weren't the most prestigious kids at Yale, but I felt okay about Yale.
Interesting you took art history, like as an undergraduate. Was that a fluke? Did you happen to take it, or had you already had that aspiration?
I grew up in a world where I didn't meet business leaders, but my mother actually was able to persuade a customer in her drugstore to take a meeting with me. And it was the summer before I went to Yale. And this guy was amazing. He built a very substantial insurance company, and he used the assets to buy a bunch of other businesses that he really liked, including French antiques and theaters and what became Sotheby's. His offices were just so splendid. He had a Louis XVI desk that he sat behind. He had this enormous tapestry behind his desk. And he was so passionate about the art and the design objects in his world. And I thought, wow, this is really something. I mean, this is not just financial success, but it's a kind of a deep commitment to culture. It's a joy in culture. And I thought, wow, that seems pretty good.
That's so interesting, because throughout the book, not only did you kind of absorb lessons from biographies you were reading, but throughout the book, you're absorbing insights from the people you meet along the way.
Well, that's kind of a Stoic idea. I mean, one of the great Stoic texts, and really the first one I read and the first one I'd recommend to anybody, was Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. He was emperor of Rome, and the Meditations was sort of literally a self-help book. He was writing it not for an audience, but to help himself live a virtuous life. And he starts out by talking about people he admires, and he makes the distinction between what I desire and what I admire. And he looks at the lives of 12 or 15 people that are sort of acquaintances or ancestors of his, and talks in considerable length about the qualities that really resonated with him. And I tried to do the same thing. If I met somebody who was successful, I would always ask them to tell me a story about how they got started. And I would use those interactions as a way of trying to learn lessons that I could use. And frankly, that's part of the motivation of the book, is to give people who read it some of the benefit that I got from mentors, from reading, from these kind of interactions.
And you found people were generally willing to share those stories?
Oh, they love to do it.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Stoics and Stoic philosophy. And what Stoicism is not, because there's a kind of popular misconception of what it means to be Stoic, and then there's what you want to teach in this book is what it does mean to be Stoic. But who even before Marcus Aurelius, who were the Stoics?
So the Stoics come out of ancient Greece, golden age of Greece, really, and among the most prominent of them are Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, who was by repute the wealthiest man in Rome, and a prolific writer on philosophy. There was Epictetus, who was born as a slave. So it's sort of interesting that Stoics come from the very top of society and from the very bottom. And the Stoic principles that there's a chapter in the book where I distill it into maybe 7 ideas. And the first idea really is value rationality is our most human attribute. Use reason to regulate emotion. It doesn't mean you don't have emotions. It doesn't mean you suppress emotions.
Which is the misconception people have
What?
now. That's the misconception
Yeah, that's
people
the
have.
misconception. It's not the idea of being unemotional or repressing your emotions. It's absolutely human to react emotionally. But if you act on your emotions without subjecting it to rational thought, without subjecting it to rational control, that can lead to outcomes or decisions that work very badly. Whereas if you take a moment to try to systematically subject your emotional reaction to the question, or to even accept responsibility for either acting on your emotion or controlling your emotion, that's a major Stoic idea. Another major Stoic idea is accept impermanence, expect change. Don't just sit around bemoaning that the world has changed, but figure out how to adapt to it. Using time is our most limited resource. Again, a Stoic concept, but very, very important. Another idea is the notion of doing less, actually. Doing less, but doing it with greater concentration. So being willing to ask yourself, is what I'm doing here essential, or am I kind of just frittering away time? And the final Stoic precept is the idea of working for the benefit of society.
Let's dive into some of what you say in the book. The Stoics prize courage, by which they mean taking action that is informed by reason, even when doing so provokes fears, even when our instinct is to panic. So talk about a time when fear, in your career, when fear might have seemed like the natural reaction a lot of people would have, and you tempered it to get past it.
Well, the story in the book that's triggered by that observation is a story where I'm about to start my own business. The man who's backing me is reluctant to accept what was the standard idea at the time, that the guy who runs the business gets a piece of the profits, because he felt like our interests wouldn't be very well aligned. And I made a proposal. I said, okay, I will put up 100% of my liquid net worth in this company, and I don't want any carried interest. But what I do want is 50% of the profits, and I will absorb 50% of the losses. That meant that, given the amount of money I was putting up versus what he was doing, if the firm lost 20% of its capital, I'd be wiped out. So I was volunteering to take an enormously high level of risk, and that obviously would produce fear. I mean, like, what happens if these risks fill against me? And the Stoic principle that applies here is you control fear by really thinking rationally about what's the worst possible outcome. Well, the worst outcome would be, for me, I'd get another job. It wasn't going to be that I was going to be homeless or destitute, or my family wasn't going to have food on the table. It was that I'd probably recreate the job I was leaving to start this firm in the first place. Well, that doesn't seem so scary. And it's a lot of people will automatically catastrophize, automatically imagine the worst possible outcome, and then be paralyzed by the fear of that into taking action.
That seems to be kind of wired into us, to exaggerate the downside and to downplay the upside.
I wouldn't say it's hardwired into us. I think it's something that by conscious thought, by reading this book, you could get out of that habit.
You mentioned Seneca, and you mentioned earlier that one of the most precious things we have in life is time. And Seneca published a series of letters that he wrote to a Roman who was overseeing things in Sicily named Lucilius. And so, dear Lucilius, do what your letter says you are doing. Embrace every hour. If you lay hands on today, you will find you are less dependent on tomorrow. While you delay, life speeds on. Everything we have belongs to others, Lucilius. Time alone is ours. Nature has put us in possession of this one thing, this fleeting, slippery thing, and anyone who wants to can dispossess us. Such is the foolishness of mortal beings. When they borrow the smallest, cheapest items, such as can easily be replaced, they acknowledge the debt, but no one considers himself indebted for taking up our time. Yet this is the one loan that even those who are grateful cannot repay. I hear him saying, value time, and also don't let other people waste your time. But talk about, how this text hits you.
Well, I think, that's a wonderful quote. And in business, it's pretty easy. You just count the zeros. And if there are not enough zeros to make a difference, if the number is not large enough to move the needle for you or the business enterprise that you're trying to lead, don't spend any time on it. One of the things I've tried to do from time to time is to take what I call a yellow pad day and really list, okay, who are people that I'm spending too much time with? Who are people that I'm not spending enough time with? Are there projects that I've gotten bogged down in that are not really good uses of my time? Are there things out there that might be really great opportunities that I'm not making the time to pursue? So I try to be very conscious of how my time is used, and I don't allow people to clog up my calendar with things that are not essential for me.
You talk about how your first deal after you started your own company, you bought a firm that was creating record jackets for record albums, which at the time wasn't quite a monopoly, but it was the biggest. It was the biggest, and it was very successful. And there were a lot of records being published, and there was a need for it. And then CDs came along, and it turned out that it didn't turn out the way you wanted.
Well, it wasn't quite CDs. It was the Sony Walkman.
Oh, the Walkman. Yeah.
It was the Sony Walkman. So people wanted cassettes.
Boy, that takes us back. But what you don't say is, you don't say I made a mistake. You say it turned out not how I wanted, but it wasn't a mistake.
To me, if you made a decision that was correct based on the information you had available at the time, you shouldn't beat yourself up over that kind of decision. In this case, there was no way that I could anticipate a Sony Walkman or that it was going to completely change the demand for records. So that was not anything to fret over. That's just bad luck. But if you don't consider something that you should have considered, or you didn't get facts that you should have gotten, if you made a mistake that was sort of a failure on your part of maybe hiring the wrong lawyer or doing a shoddy investigation or not really considering the implications of something you knew was a fact, those are mistakes that you should learn from.
You have a concept you discuss in the book, selfish philanthropy. What do you mean by that?
Well, there's a phrase that a lot of people use about philanthropy, giving back. And the implication in that phrase is that you've gotten the means to be philanthropic by taking something away. And I don't believe that. I think you've gotten the means to become philanthropic if you built a business, for example. That's added value to society. That hasn't taken anything away. For me, philanthropy is an opportunity to use the talents you have more broadly for the general good. But it means using your talents. It was the model of Rockefeller. It was the model of Carnegie. They used their exceptional organizational skills, their leadership skills, their entrepreneurial skills to create institutions, and that became a source of pleasure and satisfaction for them. And that's what I mean by selfish philanthropy, that it should be a source of real satisfaction for the philanthropist. And for me, that means active involvement, use of your talents, use of your abilities.
So now
not just writing a check to, writing a check for somebody who needs the money is noble, but that's not my driving, that's not the selfish philanthropist, that's maybe the unselfish philanthropist.
And I know that one of the philanthropic contributions of which you're most proud is this organization, Open to Debate.
Well, I felt, and this was almost 20 years ago, that the state of public discourse in America was kind of dismal, that people on the right couldn't talk to people on the left, that if you introduced a political topic at a dinner party, the conversation would fall apart, and that while there were very thoughtful organizations, think tanks on both the center right, center left, they were preaching to the choir. And I wanted to bring to the public square in America something that would be an antidote to that. My wife was incredibly helpful. She commissioned a study that looked at all kinds of forums in which to address this problem, which was really bugging me. And the one that really was outstanding was a model in the UK called Intelligence Squared, which was using Oxford Union style debate to systematically explore both sides of contentious issues. And I was able to license that name and concept for the US. It was set up as a philanthropy. I wanted it to be impactful beyond just a live audience of 400 or 500 people. We were able to get NPR support very quickly, and so we were off to the races, and it's been a great success story in a lot of dimensions. In 2006, we did Unelected Hamas is still a terrorist organization. We did
Freedom of speech includes the right to offend.
freedom of speech includes the right to offend. We did we must tolerate a nuclear Iran. I mean, we were so far ahead of the headlines in our subject matter, and we were really shining a spotlight on issues that were thought to be outside of necessarily the mainstream of debate or conversation, but they turned out to be hugely relevant. So I'm really proud of both the quality of the panelists that we've had over the years, the quality of conversations that you, John, have led and moderated, and the fact that we've built a community here of people who are interested in taking a deep dive into issues, who have the attention span for that, who are open-minded, who want to hear both sides. And that strikes me as a real contribution that we've made to the public square in America. We're now, of course, a weekly program on public radio. We have a very popular podcast. One of the debates we did last year on the anniversary of the October 7th events in Israel was Israel's actions in Gaza were justified, and that had 4 or 5 million downloads. I mean, it's just been incredibly impactful. And that's our real goal, is to bring something special to the public square, but also to encourage people to think critically, to be open-minded.
Right.
And I'm very proud to have been a
That's the
part of
thing
all
that
of that.
I would say we do push the debaters in one way. I push them in one way, which is to really bring an argument, not bring slogans, to actually engage with what the other side is actually saying, and to be civil about it. To not don't be jerks. Don't try to. It's not we destroyed the other side. It's we met the other side, and we clashed with the other side where they were. And I think that's the thing that this program does that's unique and that is so appreciated.
Well, I think, John, you've been a huge part of that because I think you've mastered the art of getting that civility, not always, but
Yeah.
most of the time, and but certainly all of the time, getting a conversation going that is illuminating for the people who are listening to it.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity. I'm very pleased you created it because it's been one of the most rewarding experiences of my professional career. I also, when I was in conversations to join the organization, I'll tell you this now, I've never shared this, but I had a conversation with Dana Wolf, who was the first executive producer, and I said, so does this organization put its thumb on the scale in these arguments? She said, absolutely not. Bob's take is let the best ideas win, regardless. And you've been true to that. I just want to say that. And I've seen sometimes when you're frustrated at the outcome, but you always said that's how it went. And I just want to thank you for creating it and for running it that way.
Well, it's been a source of real pride for me too. So as a selfish philanthropist, I've gotten a lot of pleasure out of it.
How do you feel we've done in terms of our goal of trying to improve the public discourse and its quality?
Well, I can't really say that public discourse is in better shape now than it was when we started. It is not. But I think we've certainly moved the needle in the right direction, and we've been true to our principles. I mean, the debates that we present have a broad audience. They deal with consequential topics. They present both sides absolutely, as you say, even-handedly and fairly. And people come away, particularly when we had the voting, we were able to get a sense of how people would react to what we were presenting. And I thought it was extraordinary. I mean, 25, 30% of all the people who came in with an opinion changed their opinion after hearing the debate. And when I'd mingle with the audience and I'd ask people, did they change their vote? If they said they didn't, they would frequently say, well, I didn't change it, but I realized that there were facts or arguments or moral sentiments on the other side that I had never considered before. And it really opened my mind. So I think it's been a huge success on that dimension.
I've had the same experience talking to members of the audience, and even folks who have changed their minds, rather than being a little bit abashed about it, which I think is one reason that people stick by their guns. They don't want to admit they were wrong or they held an idea that wasn't valid. I find that they're somewhat exhilarated by the fact that they heard something that their minds got bigger. And a lot of folks, as you would say, well, I didn't really change my mind, but I definitely learned something I didn't know before. So I agree with you that that's a mark of our success. I want to bring some other voices now into our conversation. First, I want to welcome Edward Lucas. He's formerly a senior editor at The Economist, currently senior fellow and senior advisor at the Center for European Policy Analysis. He's also the author of several books, including The New Cold War. Edward, thanks for joining us in the conversation. And what question do you have for Bob?
Yes. So I should probably start off by saying thank you to Bob for his hospitality, because I was a speaker in one of the early debates, in fact, on Russia, a rather prescient debate called Is Russia Becoming Our Enemy Again? The thing that struck me reading the book was the interplay between Bob's thinking on law, which he studied, and economics, which he studied, psychology, which he knows a lot about, and then his more recent deep dive into classical thought and classical philosophy with Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, and also his deep understanding of mathematics. And I was just wondering if, Bob, if you'd like to reflect a bit more on how those disciplines which are often seen in silos. Probably few people know them all as deeply as you do, but how well they interact.
So I think one of the Stoic principles that I've tried to apply, and it's not really a Stoic principle, but the idea of lifetime learning. So you're quite right. I mean, I have been a student of pretty much any business that I go into, any activity I try to undertake in a serious way. I really do try to approach it like a student. And that sort of academic orientation has also informed a lot of my business style as a manager. What I try to do in business is encourage people to just sit around the table, throw out their best ideas. Seniority doesn't matter, titles don't matter, organization charts don't matter. The ideas stand on their own merit. So there is a kind of a deep commitment that I've had toward taking an intellectual approach to pretty much every activity that I'm involved in, and approach everything as a student. I've tried to be a lifelong learner, and I think that that's a precept in the book that I hope people take away as well.
I want to go back to Ed to see, Ed, do you have a follow-up or another question that you'd like to go with?
Yes, there's another very interesting bit in the book, which is where you suddenly get into the visual arts and Japan, and you also have a very interesting chapter about your collection of fine arts, which you say is a great thing to do, although it's not necessarily a great investment.
The question about art collecting for me, it's been another avenue to learning and a source of great satisfaction. I mean, I have built a collection of Chinese art, particularly focused on Buddhist sculpture, Chinese antiquities, and that was a real window to learning about China's civilization through millennia. More recently, I've been collecting video art, art that has music and sound fields as an element, art that involves technology, that involves interactive technology. And to me, this is really, really exciting area because it's the natural language of young people. They get their information on screens, they do their communicating on devices, and it seems to me that this is the most current and relevant form of artistic expression, and I'm sort of delighted and excited to be a leading collector in this field.
And thanks so much for your question. Next up, we have Heather Landy. Heather is a senior editor at Bloomberg News, where she heads their coverage of work and management. Prior to Bloomberg, she was executive editor at Quartz, and before that was editor-in-chief of American Banker magazine. Heather, thanks for joining us. Please come in with your question.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, I'm curious if we think back just in the last 25 years or so, we've kind of lurched from crisis to crisis, whether it was 9/11, the 2008 financial crisis, COVID, climate emergencies, now what looks to be the beginnings of a global trade war. And I'm curious if you have found that moments like these have been more of a test of your stoicism or things that have reinforced your stoicism, looking back if these were sort of crucible moments for you in that way.
Well, I think one of the Stoic ideas is to accept impermanence, to expect change, to be thankful for conditions that are favorable, and when the conditions change, you just have to adapt to it. So it's simply part of the Stoic idea about life is to view those changes as opportunities to learn and challenges to adapt.
Yes, to follow up, I would ask how you find that Stoicism has served you in particular in your leadership roles, and how you're able to not only maintain but maybe communicate that Stoic approach when maybe people around you aren't feeling quite the same level of Stoicism.
Well, I think you have to accept, again, the idea that the people that you're dealing with every day are going to have emotions. Their emotions are going to be unruly. Their objectives are not necessarily going to be aligned with yours. But acting for the benefit of society means all of your constituents have to be taken into account, have to be listened to. You've got to meet the needs not only of yourself, but of the other people in the room. And it kind of, I mean, those ideas lead to successful outcomes in negotiation. But for me, they also led to successful ways of incorporating the ideas of a broad group of people in any decision process. So I've tried to be, as I mentioned before in the previous question, to make our business decision making very as academic and as fact-based and as analytically based as possible, and make it as unbureaucratic and unauthoritarian as possible.
Heather, thank you very much for your questions. Bob, I'm curious who you wrote the book for specifically. Is it absolutely universal? I mean, when you say exceptionally ambitious, should everybody step up and consider themselves exceptionally ambitious, or at least have the potential for being exceptionally ambitious?
Well, I have to admit that was the publisher's line.
Okay.
But the idea, I think, one of the things I love about America, or at least America for most of the time when I was growing up and pursuing a career, was that we really value equality of opportunity, that people of ability should be able to get a great education, should be able to end up far removed from their childhood circumstances, should be able to exercise positions of authority, should be able to create wealth if that's their motivation. And I think in America that's supportive of those ideas is very central to my sense of what this country should be. But answering more specifically about the readers of the book, my hope is that the book will give people who have childhood dreams, no matter what they are, the toolkit to realize those dreams. It's not necessarily financial success, but it's doing anything that involves excellence, that involves a long-term commitment, that involves serious levels of achievement in something that seems really challenging and large scale relative to your expectations as a child.
So you explain in the book that you only really discovered the Stoics after you'd been living by Stoic precepts for most of your life. Mm-hmm. So talk about that. When did you discover the Stoics that people had been
I started reading Stoicism and reading in cognitive behavioral psychology, which is a kind of a modern offshoot of Stoic thought, only about a decade ago, maybe a little longer than that. But I realized that I was a natural born Stoic. This really gave a kind of an intellectual framework that I could structure a book around. And that reading that really gave me the sense that the stories that I lived could be presented in a way that were really going to help people because they were applied philosophy, applied psychology, and would be able to encourage readers to take them on board and in a way that abstract philosophy wouldn't mean very much. I think my stories as just stories about one guy's achievements don't mean much. But when you fuse them, I thought I could create a book that would really be helpful to people.
So fundamental to what you're saying is the idea that you can learn these precepts and learn to incorporate them into your life, which I guess to some degree you've made reference to cognitive behavioral therapy. You talk about it a bit in the book, but there's a therapy which actually focuses on changing your behaviors through insight to yourself and knowledge. Talk about how that would impact, say, the person who is scared to take a big risk and may be instinctively fearful. Can that be changed through thinking about it, working through it, and again, would that person want to pick up your book and sort of get some inspiration in that regard?
I would certainly hope so. I mean, I've certainly dealt with situations that would scare a lot of people, but generally the fear of an undesired outcome is worse than the outcome itself. The outcome is something you can kind of deal with, and if you think about it rationally, it's probably not all that bad. But the fear can be paralyzing, and the fear can be far worse than the thing itself. And I think cognitive psychology teaches you to be really aware when you're doing that, aware of when you're automatically going to a catastrophic outcome that's really quite unlikely, or to imagine a result that's far worse than what the actual result might be.
So the book has an implied message that you should really swing for the fences rather than try to hit singles, I would say. Another quote, large-scale success requires thinking big and committing to goals many would not consider attainable. Nothing in this world has ever been accomplished by somebody who thought it was impossible. And you have swung for the fences a bunch of times.
Well, swinging for the fences...
Or you call it going all in.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, those are accurate quotes. I mean, nothing was ever accomplished by somebody who thought it was impossible. And it may be that you try to do something that you don't succeed at. But the process of trying is going to teach you something. The failure is going to teach you something, or should. And that's the reason to err on the side of taking a more ambitious goal on board, or trying to succeed at something that is a stretch for you. If you don't succeed, you're going to learn something. So that's sort of one part of the question. But the swing for the fences is really that's a different idea. You should only swing for the fences when the odds are in your favor. Mm-hmm. And it's to be pretty rational about the risks that you do take. Don't be paralyzed by fear of the risk filling against you, but don't be foolhardy either.
You used a phrase in the beginning of our conversation I'd like to talk about a little bit more. The obstacle is the way.
Yes.
That seems to sum up everything you're talking about. So it could sound paradoxical. I suppose it might even be, but maybe not.
Well, it's a kind of a classic phrase in Stoic philosophy. Ryan Holiday, it comes out of Marcus Aurelius's book, when he talks about people who are frustrating his ability to get done what he wants to do, and he uses that phrase, they are the obstacle, but they don't have to impede our ultimate goal, because we just have to figure out a way to deal with it. And Ryan Holiday, who's written the cult classic in this field, calls his book The Obstacle is the Way. So it is a very basic idea of Stoicism, that you don't get frustrated by obstacles, but you try to think as rationally as possible about how to deal with them.
What's wrong with anger?
There's nothing wrong with getting angry, but acting angry may well not serve your purposes very well. And one of the Stoic ideas is you subject your emotion to the question, well, what's in it for me? Take responsibility for the way you act when you're angry. Do you act angry, or do you act in a different way? And there's a story in the book about a president of a bank who comes into my office and really bullying me to accept something the bank wants me to do, and threatening my reputation if I don't do it. I was furious. But I realized that and I experienced him as a bully, but I wasn't going to respond with anger without giving myself a little bit of a Stoic break. So I told a white lie. I said I had to go to the men's room. And I just thought about the situation, decided I had to capitulate. I did it. I mustered the will to do it as gracefully as I possibly could. And while I experienced this guy as a bully, he turned out to be nothing. anything but. And his last words leaving my office was, "Bob, if you ever need a favor from this bank, come directly to me." So, it just shows that, that is an illustration of where I was angry, legitimately angry, felt bullied, but was able to control my anger and act in a way that served my interests far better than acting angry would have done.
You did an unusual thing, I would say, in putting this book out. I said it at the beginning that you wrote it yourself, really wrote it, every word, no ghostwriter. That's not something that typically happens with people in your position. How was the experience of writing this for you?
I really liked it. It took a long time before I had something in mind that I really wanted to write. But the idea of the Stoic philosophy of cognitive behavioral psychology, of short chapters, most of which had a precept that I thought could be generally used to help people succeed in their ambitions. Once I had that in my mind and had a conviction that this was a book worth writing, I did it in about 18 months. It absolutely is my voice. There were people who helped me with editing, helped me thinking through the stories, helped me think through the sequencing and so forth. But this is my voice talking to people, and I enjoyed the process of writing.
I just wanted to say for people who haven't read the book yet, it's very straightforward. The chapters are quite short, actually, and it's really quite readable. And my wrap-up question here goes back to this kid reading biographies in the late 1940s and early 1950s. What would little kid Robert Rosenkranz have made of this book if it were available to him back then?
Well, I hope what he would have made of it is, wow, this is really helpful.
Robert Rosenkranz, thank you so much for taking the time. Congratulations on the book. It's called The Stoic Capitalist, and we wish you a lot of luck with it.
Well, thank you, John. Really enjoyed the interview.
Thanks.